A CEO arrives at a funeral for an old friend, where he encounters twin boys dressed in black who stop him in his tracks. "Suits, sir. You may not have been there for her, but can you be here for us?" He gazes at them with hope, the weight of their words resting in his chest, a heavy reminder. Because even before they say another word, he senses the truth. Let's find out exactly who they are before we get started. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from, so drop your comments below. Don't forget to like this video to show your support for the channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The story unfolds in the funeral home, where the scent of polished wood mingles with the delicate aroma of fading flowers, creating a unique atmosphere. With soft whispers and the occasional shuffle of feet, Daniel Grant stood near the back, hands clasped behind him, ready for what was to come, listening without truly hearing someone was speaking at the front. A man in his 50s with thinning hair and a voice that filled his stomach with joy. She had a whole life ahead of her. Without him, a whole world he wasn't part of. He shouldn't have come. That thought had been echoing in his mind since he stepped out of his car and caught the first set of unfamiliar eyes glancing his way. He reminded himself it was simply to pay his respects, to stand in the back for a few minutes and then gracefully slip out before anyone noticed. Realized that being here was a mistake, but it didn't change anything in a negative way. Forget the moment he had left her when she needed him the most. A movement to his right drew him away from. His thoughts drifted as the funeral director provided gentle instructions to the Mers, signaling that the service was coming to a close, and people began to gather their belongings, rose from their seats, embracing, whispering, gently dabbing at their eyes. Daniel exhaled with a sense of relief. Slowly already angling toward the side exit, he felt a sense of freedom in leaving the burial behind, knowing it was not his place to stay. He turned, embracing the possibilities ahead. Before he could take a step, two small figures joyfully stepped into his path. They were identical, dressed in sleek black suits that sparkled with possibility. Seemed a bit too formal for their petite frames, with dark hair, sharp eyes, and a determined expression. Their jaws held a certain intrigue that sent a flutter through his stomach before they even spoke. One on the right, slightly taller, held out a folded letter. The edges crumpled from being gripped too tightly. "Sir, the boy said, his voice calm and unwavering, "you weren't there for her, but can you be now?" Here for us, the gentle hum of conversation around them appeared to soften. Daniel stared at them, his mind a blank canvas. The letter in the boy's hand felt like a grenade, yet he chose not to reach for it. The shorter boy shifted on his feet, watching him with keen interest as she spoke. It may sound unbelievable, but that's exactly why she decided to write it down. Daniel took a moment to focus and breathe deeply. The resemblance was unmistakable now, the shape of their faces, the way they stood with dark hair, and that was truly remarkable. His voice emerged with clarity, more challenging than he expected. "Who are you?" The boy with the letter, Alex, if he recalled what someone had mentioned during the service, lifting his chin as he thought of her sons, which struck him with even more intensity. Then it should have sons, not just hers. He sensed it even before he took the letter, before he noticed his own name beautifully inscribed on the front in Lena's handwriting. His fingers tingled with excitement as Daniel unfolded the paper. "I could sense the possibility of understanding. I know you might feel frustrated with me for not sharing this earlier, but perhaps this will lead to a positive conversation. I want you to understand that my actions weren't meant to hurt you. I did it because I care about you and your well-being. I knew you would have done what you always do, Ron. I wasn't upset about that at all. I understand, but my time here is limited, and they truly need you right now. Their father. And even if you have doubts about being that for them, please ensure they find their way and don't end up lost in the system. You owe me that much. Lena." His pulse raced in his ears as he read the letter. Twice, 3 times the words blending together, his throat felt a bit constricted. It couldn't be real. He stopped, and the boys were still. As he watched and waited, he remained blissfully unaware of their expectations for him to speak. "We don't have anyone else," Eli said, softer than his brother. "Mrs. Myers is just too experienced to take. He took care of us for a long time, even though he didn't know who Myers was or anything about it. Their lives." And the significance of what they were saying filled his chest with a sense of urgency, inspiring his mind to seek a way forward. There seemed to be a lack of a logical explanation for why this wasn't his problem, but that's okay. "I need time to think," he muttered, stepping back. Alex's expression shifted with determination. She mentioned you might respond that way. The words resonated more than they ought to have. He turned away, sensing an unsteady pressure building within. Something pressed against his ribs that he didn't want to name. His car was waiting, with the driver already standing by the door, ready for the next adventure. Eli's voice called out just in time, halting him right before he reached the door. "We're hopeful that you'll stay with us this time, Daniel. Please don't vanish again. We really need you here." He got back in the car. The letter still clutched in his fist, and he told the driver to go. Overlooking the way his hands were shaking, Daniel found himself embracing the night. Even as sleep eluded him each time he closed his eyes, the letter lingered in his mind, the significance of Lena's words gently nudging at his heart. He had left the funeral. He was working to reassure himself that it wasn't real, that the boys weren't his concern, and that the past could remain where he had left it, buried it years ago. But Lena had always embraced complexity, and now even in a moment of unexpected connection, she had managed to drop something in his lap, leaving him with a delightful mystery to unravel. He sat in his penthouse, a glass of whiskey resting against his palm, the letter unfolded in front of him on the table. Polished table, he had read it so many times that every word was etched in his memory, yet he continued, gazing at it, hoping that if I focus long enough, it might transform into something different. They need you now, Daniel. They truly need there. He wasn't just a father. He was a businessman, running companies and creating opportunities instead of just bedtime stories. His schedule was filled with exciting meetings, travel opportunities, and decisions that could positively impact entire industries. There wasn't space for two kids in black suits with wise old eyes encouraging him to step up as the clock on the wall ticked. It was past 3 in the morning when he finally set the letter aside and dead to get some rest, reassuring himself that he would tackle it later. Later turned out to be much sooner than expected. The next morning, his assistant, Claire, stepped into his office with a look that suggested she was facing a challenge, but ready to tackle it head-on. "2 children are waiting in your office, and Daniel is focused on his laptop. Then someone should definitely call their parents. They're eagerly waiting for you," she said with her arms crossed, mentioning that their names were Alex and Eli. His fingers danced over the keyboard before he leaned back in his chair, ready to say, "Tell them I'm in a meeting, CLA." They stood firm and said, and I quote, "We'll wait. We have nowhere else to go." Daniel exhaled sharply but waved a hand. "Fine, send them in." He was looking forward to their arrival, them to enter with a hint of uncertainty, perhaps feeling a bit anxious about stepping into a billionaire's office unannounced instead. They walked in with such confidence, as if they were meant to be there. Alex eagerly climbed into the chair across from him, small hands resting on it with excitement. Eli took his time looking around the office, his eyes scanning the towering bookshelves and the floor. Ceiling windows as if he were evaluating the space, Eli remarked on the lovely view at last. "As you settle into the other chair, you embrace the entire building with confidence, right, Daniel?" Closed his laptop. "I do." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "That means we own a significant part of it." Daniel's patience was wearing a bit thin. "What do you want?" Alex placed his hands. "Let's gather around the desk to talk about our bright future." "You're 6.5, Eli." Corrected, Daniel dragged a hand down his face. "Where's your guardian, Mrs. Myers?" "Right. She's waiting outside," Alex said, "and she was eager for us to have a chat with you." First, Daniel turned his attention to the door, then sighed. "What exactly do you anticipate my actions?" Alex's expression remained steady. "You're our dad." Daniel held firm against the urge to reflect on the letter still shines brightly in his mind. "I only discovered that yesterday." "It's not our fault, Eli." It seems Daniel overlooked that. "And let's not forget about Mrs. Myers. She's been doing a wonderful job taking care of things." Alex mentioned that she's getting older and feels she can't continue indefinitely. She expressed her thoughts about us. "It's great to think about having someone permanent." Daniel, take a moment to let that idea sink in before leaning forward, and you can decide how that should unfold. "Me well," Eli said, tilting his head. "Who else could it be?" He was amazed. "I was having this conversation about running a company, and it's interesting how our paths differ when it comes to raising kids. We need to uplift ourselves," Alex said. "You just need to hold on to us." "And that's really what matters," Alex shrugged. Semantics. Daniel stood, pushing his chair back. "This is just a moment, and it will pass. Twins exchanged a look, and then Alex crossed his arms. So, you're just going to let us go into foster care? Daniel's stomach. It's interesting that he hadn't considered that possibility. It's just part of the learning journey for kids, Eli said, with a softer voice, that they don't have anywhere to go, but there's always hope for a new beginning. He understood the system well. It was designed with adults in mind, not for kids. Like those kids who once had a home filled with love from their mother, those kids who he would find himself moving from place to place, eagerly anticipating the possibility of something lasting that could eventually arrive. He turned toward the door, pushed down whatever was beginning to crawl up his throat. I'll talk to Mrs. Mears. The elderly woman was waiting in the hallway, hands clasped over her purse, her expression full of potential. She seemed unfazed to see him. They're persistent, she remarked. Daniel. He rubbed his temples, wondering why she had brought them here. She raised a brow, responding that they wanted to be here. To see you. You could have stopped them. Why? Her voice was calm. Even though they're yours. Sons. Daniel bristled. I didn't know about them, and now you do. He found it frustrating how straightforward. She suggested that there might be another option, giving him a long look filled with possibility. After considering her words carefully, she finally exhaled, sharing the news that their mother has passed away. They have no other family. And I've been here long enough to understand my boundaries. Can watch them, but I can't raise them. They need someone who can. Daniel felt. The walls are closing in, and I'm not sure how to handle it. Just like Lena didn't know, as Mrs. Mears pointed out. She realized it impacted her more than expected. He shook his head, expressing the need for time to think. Mrs. Myers sighed. Then he nodded toward the twins still sitting in his office, eager and ready. Their patience was admirable, and he felt a sense of anticipation growing in his chest. Heavier. He glanced back at the boys, then ran a hand through his hair, his mind buzzing with possibilities. Encouraged him to step back and allow others to take charge, but Lena's words etched in his memory. They truly need you now, Daniel. They need their father. Took a breath. 2 weeks, he said, filled with a sense of wonder as the words flowed from him. I'll find a way, just you wait. Mrs. Meyer observed him thoughtfully for a while. In that moment before nodding, I truly believe you will use that time wisely for their benefit. Daniel stepped back into his office. And there were the twins, still waiting with their arms crossed, ready for whatever came next. Hopeful. Alex lifted his chin, and after 2 weeks, Daniel said the boys exchanged a. Before reaching across the desk, Eli grinned with excitement. Congratulations, you've just made a fantastic purchase. A trial run as a dad. Daniel was filled with excitement as he realized what he just agreed to before. Alex and Eli were marching out of his office with the energy of having just closed a $1 million deal 2 weeks ago. He has set aside 2 weeks to explore options and discover a solution that allows him to approach the situation thoughtfully, transforming into someone new. The initial hint of difficulty appeared even before they arrived home. The car ride was meant to be straightforward, with a private driver and a peaceful atmosphere. Back seat and a route that usually allowed him to gather his thoughts after a long day. Instead, he spent the drive attempting to facilitate a lively discussion between Alex and Eli about the possibility of superheroes facing lawsuits for property damage they cause. Eli pointed out that if you break something, you take responsibility and make it right. It's a great point that they're saving lives. Alex argued that the city should definitely cover it. That's not how contracts work. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling hopeful that both of you would understand. Own property? Why does it matter? Just be quiet, Eli muttered. We're simply expressing our thoughts. It's great to be prepared for anything, especially if you ever find yourself becoming a superhero. By the time they reached the penthouse, Daniel was all ready. Though he felt exhausted, he had anticipated that they would be impressed, perhaps even a bit intimidated by the sleek, modern design of the place. For an efficient and stylish space, consider minimalist furniture and art pieces that truly add value. More than some people's salaries, but Alex's first reaction was, a smile spreads as this place resembles a hotel lobby. And Eli happily wandered toward the couch. Running a hand over the leather, Daniel replied, I have stuff. Setting his briefcase down, Eli gave him a curious look. Where's your beanbag? Why would I want a beanbag? Alex just flopped onto the couch, but this couch is a bit too stiff. That couch is quite the investment, more than a car. Alex swung his legs over the armrest. Then you Daniel was ready to argue when he heard the sound of something spilling. He turned just in time to see a cheerful orange puddle spreading across his glass coffee table from a juice mishap. Eli announced with a bright demeanor, not looking remotely sorry. Daniel inhaled slowly, feeling hopeful. I don't have. We brought our own juice. Alex mentioned that the lids were a bit tricky, but that's okay. Before he could respond, his housekeeper Mara stepped in from the hallway, took one look at the mess, and brightened the atmosphere with her presence. She took a moment to reflect on her life choices. Having dedicated years to working for Daniel and witnessing great heights, stakes negotiations in the presence of some of the biggest names in business have graced his doors. And there's always the potential for something remarkable to happen. Mr. Grant, her voice was tight, but there was a certain intensity in her expression that hinted at resilience. There are children in your home. Yes, I notice, Daniel said, with a bright smile as she surveyed the surroundings. Seen for how long temporarily her expression radiated clarity that it feels like the wait has been quite a journey. I'm ready for a raise, Daniel. Let's tackle this together. Marlo was already reaching for a cleaning cloth, expressing her thoughts about wealthy men with a hint of determination. Decisions led to a whirlwind of challenges, and within an hour, his imported marble was ready to shine. The bathtub held a delightful stuffed dinosaur named Frank, and his security system had been activated twice, once due to Alex's curiosity to discover the exciting outcomes of pushing all the buttons on the control panel, and an exhilarating pillow fight battle royale had almost concluded with one of his ridiculously expensive vases teat. Erring on the edge of disaster by the time morning arrived, he found himself reflecting on every decision he had ever made, and it was just the beginning. With breakfast, what do you want to eat? He asked, scrolling through his phone. We can have anything delivered. Pancakes, Alex said with excitement, and Daniel nodded in agreement. He eagerly texted his assistant to arrange for the highest-rated breakfast from the best place in the city to be sent over. Pancakes. An hour later, the chef himself arrived, carrying a plate of perfectly stacked pancakes dusted with powdered sugar. Sweetness paired with organic maple syrup from a charming little farm that surely had a delightful waiting list. The boys gazed at them, and Eli exclaimed, "These aren't real pancakes." Daniel chimed in, smiled, "They're just pancakes. They're a bit special." Alex said with a hint of humor about moms. Had unique edges. Daniel looked at the pancakes, then back at them. So you don't. We're excited about getting those. Eli clarified that we want the ones from a box, but the kind that burn. It's a bit tricky if you don't flip them quickly enough. Daniel rubbed his temples, feeling the challenge. Alex mentioned that Daniel reached out about cooking lessons. Mara, by the time he arrived at the office, he was a bit behind schedule. Claire, his assistant, raised an eyebrow as he walked in. Rough morning, sir? He was just getting through his first meeting when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and there it was, an incoming call. Call Penthouse. He let it ring. A minute later, CLA walked in, looking slightly upbeat. It's amusing. You should take that, Daniel. He exhaled, put the call on speaker, and, leaning back in his chair, he asked, What happened, Mr. Grant? We have an emergency with Eli. A voice came through the speaker, and Daniel sat up, curious about what had happened. We ran out of syrup. Silence filled the room as Daniel stared at the phone, contemplating the possibilities ahead. It was quite a situation when Alex discovered what Eli had said, and things took a serious turn with Daniel. Ended the call, and the rest of the day had its challenges, but he remained hopeful as he tried setting. The boys made some changes to the rules. No running in the office, as Alex mentioned. Crossed it out and scribbled underneath, just in case the meeting turns out to be a bit dull. Bedtime is at 8, Eli, only if we're feeling tired. His employees were quite puzzled by the determined approach. A seal who was once too intimidating to even approach now had 2 kids joyfully trailing behind him, making playful faces. Back at the board meetings, he accidentally switched his screensaver to a delightfully quirky cartoon of himself labeled Grumpy Work. By the end of the day, Claire placed a cup of coffee on his desk and offered him a. With a sympathetic look, Daniel exhaled. I know. She smirked. I've noticed you lose things before, and it's quite amusing. He wasn't certain about the extent of it. With just 2 weeks of entertainment ahead, he knew he could make it through. It was all about survival, and he was ready for the challenge. 2 weeks. What a challenge it could be. Daniel had encountered some of the most challenging negotiations in the business world. But he was in for a delightful surprise with two 6-year-olds who were completely unconcerned about utilize contracts or financial incentives that they would remain steadfast against. He tried, of course, with expensive gifts and luxury distractions, and it was his. His first instinct the morning after the syrup crisis was to take charge and make things right. The situation. If he was with them for 2 weeks, he was determined to make it as smooth as possible, which meant keeping them engaged and away from trouble. His strategy involves addressing the issue with financial solutions. The personal shopper arrived at the penthouse, bringing along bags filled with exciting top-tier toys, including remote-controlled cars and gaming consoles. Designer kids' clothes, the works. The twins hardly noticed them, while Eli playfully poked at one of the exciting books gadgets. Daniel exclaimed, "What is this? A drone? State of the art." Eli shrugged, feeling cool about it. Alex flipped through the TV channels, not even glancing up. "Hey, do you have pizza?" His Daniel looked a bit concerned. "But I can definitely get it." "Pizza." Alex stretched across the couch, and that could have been a more enjoyable way to spend your money. Daniel was beginning to. He had a feeling they were playfully challenging him to explore his theory, so he took them to a fantastic exclusive amusement park, the kind that promises endless fun. Of a place that had a year-long waiting list. But if you had a few million to spare, you could be escorted past the lines, given special treatment and guided onto every ride without a moment's wait. Alex looked. Eli gazed at the cotton candy stand, feeling a bit underwhelmed by its size. "They have funnel cakes." Daniel exhaled with excitement. "Yes. Do you want one?" "Yeah." Eli replied enthusiastically, "But we." Daniel took in the stunningly designed park, feeling grateful for the experience instead of just going to a regular carnival. The beautifully manicured landscaping and the custom-built rides made it clear that they had a valid point. Was accustomed to the idea that thinking bigger was better, that access and exclusivity added value, but these kids had a refreshing perspective. When they got back, he ordered pizza, and they enjoyed it sitting on the floor in front of the TV, watching an animated movie. At some point, Eli cozied up under a blanket, and Alex joined in on the fun of talking animals. Daniel sat back against the couch, arms crossed, already half asleep but still holding on to a sense of comfort. The highlight of your day was enjoying affordable pizza while watching a movie, with Alex blissfully lost in the moment. Eli yawned and cheerfully said, "It's all about having fun like everyone else, Daniel." There was no response to that, but as the days went by, he found himself gradually adjusting. During the first week, he eagerly counted down the days, anticipating the end of the 2 weeks, but now his mornings were filled with delightful sounds. They were filled with lively discussions about whether breakfast truly counted as a real meal if it was just cereal, and whether or not Eli's stew bear can be officially recognized as a security. Why officer is an interesting question. In the penthouse, he began to appreciate the little details, like the way Alex always carried around an old creased photo of Lena, slipping it into his pocket before leaving the house, the way Eli fidgeted with the bracelet on his wrist, something delicate and worn that clearly belonged to their mother. They shared a quiet bond, even without words about her. Much, but when they did, it wasn't in a sad way. It was matter of fact, like she was still a part of them, just in a new and exciting way. One night during the unusually quiet dinner, Alex finally brought up the question that had been lingering in the air. What was she like? Daniel. Surprised, he set down his fork. Lena and Alex exchanged nods, while Eli remained silent. He was listening, and Daniel hesitated. It was simple to steer clear of discussing the past when no one brought it up. He had spent years reassuring himself that he had made the right choice by leaving it behind. It was meant to be a fresh start, but the reality was far from tidy. She paused, and he took a moment to reflect. Rubbing the back of his neck, she was determined. Alex smirked. "Yeah, we know, Eli." He glanced up. "Did you love her?" Daniel exhaled. "Yeah, I did." There was a pause. Before Alex spoke again, he asked, "Why didn't you stay?" He had no answer that felt right. It was the first time he truly felt the impact of his absence in their lives. He had spent so much time thinking of Lena as someone from his past that he never paused to consider what that. They had grown up without him, and it's completely natural for them to wonder about it. A few days later, Alex developed a small cough, which was the beginning of an unexpected journey. Daniel hardly noticed. And then the fever arrived for Daniel, who had bravely faced Billion-dollar crises were met with unwavering resolve as he reached out to his private doctor in the midst of it all. Night pacing the penthouse, feeling the energy of the world around me. It's a chilly evening, and the doctor is here, said clearly, suppressing a smile. Daniel remained uncertain about what might happen next. It's not as bad as it seems, but make sure he stays hydrated and gets some rest. This will pass soon. Daniel sat by the bed, arms crossed, watching Alex sleep, believing that the strength of his attention could ward off any worries. The fever Eli sat beside him, both of them sharing a serious moment. You're just not quite getting the hang of this, Eli whispered. I know. Daniel said. The fever broke by morning. Alex woke up, cranky but fine. And Daniel realized he had spent the night worrying over something that had never even been a concern. The challenge wasn't just the sickness itself. It was the understanding that something occurring to them now felt. Personally, he was uncertain about when that had shifted, but by the end of the second week, he sensed the question coming. Their glances were filled with anticipation, as if they were eagerly waiting for something to unfold. It was one lovely evening after dinner when Eli finally spoke up, asking when we have to leave. Daniel. Frozen, Alex looked down at his plate. It's been 2 weeks, and the weight. In Daniel's chest, there was a new feeling now. When he made the deal, it had been easy to view it as a deadline, a temporary arrangement, yet now the idea of them leaving felt off in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Words he had spent his whole life embracing attachments he had been skilled at. It's amazing how, without him realizing it, 2 6-year-olds had broken through. He faced every challenge head-on. And now he was ready to explore new possibilities after 3 months had passed. And the boys were still there. The deal had been for 2 weeks, but somewhere along the way, the deadline paused, leaving room for possibilities. There was always a reason to hold on to them for another day, another week. First, it was due to Alex getting sick, and then Eli's school project required attention. Finishing after that, Daniel felt confident that finding the right place for them was a journey worth taking, and he believed in the process. Truthfully, he had paused his search. The penthouse now held a different vibe. It was still sleek, still spotless, thanks to Mara's growing patience, and that's something to appreciate. It was a calm moment with sneakers by the front door and several boxes in the kitchen, hinting at a growing collection of drawings on his desk. Many of them amusing caricatures of himself that Eli cheerfully insisted were artistic interpretations. He had developed a curious habit of checking the time around 3 in the afternoon, aware that, in just an hour, Alex and Eli will burst through the door, bringing with them a whirlwind of noise and exciting stories. And intriguing new arguments. He had discovered insights he never anticipated gaining, like how to negotiate bedtime with 6-year-olds and which brands of macaroni and cheese are acceptable and which. Rhea challenged to food. Alex had somehow formed a wonderful friendship with Grant, the chauffeur, and would sit up front on their drives, eagerly asking endless questions about cars. Eli, on the other hand, had developed an interest in Daniel's work and discovered financial reports from his desk. There were underlying things he didn't understand, and he once asked a room full of executives why their quarterly projections weren't aligning. It was great that the kid had no concept of embarrassment. Daniel admired that quality in him. It was a delightful surprise to discover how much had changed when CLA pointed it out one afternoon while sliding a folder across his desk. You've missed 2 board meetings. And Daniel barely glanced up. Rescheduled. That's not the part I'm worried about, he frowned. Then what? Claire smirked. You're aware of what a parent-teacher conference is, and he attended. I also heard you had a meaningful conversation, discussing bedtime routines with Mara and reflecting on last week when you stayed up late assisting Eli with a science project about electricity. Brings a sense of joy and accomplishment. Daniel closed the folder, wondering if there was a purpose to this. Claire leaned against the desk. Yes, you're unique, and the exciting part is that I believe you enjoy it. He didn't answer, mainly because he was unsure. He had never envisioned this becoming a lasting situation, but if that were the case, then why hadn't he done anything to change it? The answer came sooner than he expected. It started with a knock on his door. As he glanced up, a woman in a gray suit appeared in the doorway, bringing a sense of anticipation. Expression calm, something in his gut twisted before she even. Mr. Grant spoke, and she introduced herself as Olivia Marks. I work with Child Protective Services. And the next 5 minutes were filled with excitement and activity. Used to absorbing information quickly, but this was a unique experience. He felt like he had been dropped into the middle of a negotiation he hadn't prepared for Mrs. Mears, who, with good intentions, was not a lasting resolution emerged as the system recognized the boy's situation, and since Daniel had yet to file for custody, there was potential for positive change. Legally, he wasn't their guardian, but he made an effort to keep his voice steady. What does it mean when she folded her hands? It means that unless a suitable guardian is found, there are possibilities ahead. Steps forward, the boys will be placed into foster care, bringing new opportunities and hope for their future. He nodded, brushing off the punch to the ribs as if it didn't bother him at all. He cleared his throat. That makes sense. I understand this situation is unique, and it's great that we are continuing, but we should focus on stability. From my perspective, your lifestyle might need a little adjustment to align with that goal. 2 children, he shared a brief laugh. Know it. Since she nodded, I believe we can start the transition process. He opened. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. That's when he noticed footsteps approaching from behind him. Alex and Eli stood in the doorway, clearly having arrived home without him. Understanding the situation and noticing the way Alex's hands were curled into fists, it was clear they had heard everything. Alex's voice carried a sharpness that was unmistakable. So that's it. Daniel hesitated. Alex, just say it. His face was a mystery, but his voice cracked. You don't want us. That's not Eli. He looked down, and Mom knew you'd run. Daniel inhaled sharply. Eli didn't raise his voice, but it resonated with a powerful impact. Then if he had, that's why she never told you. The silence lingered. Then Alex. As they turned and walked out, Eli followed. While Daniel remained still, the meeting had come to a close. In just a few minutes, there were forms to sign and logistics to arrange for everything that was needed. Approval. Daniel was filled with excitement as he stood outside, reflecting on the day. The penthouse was filled with a sense of hope as the social worker assisted Alex and Eli into the car. Though they didn't say goodbye, Alex climbed in first, ready for the next chapter. Staring straight ahead, Eli paused for half a second, as if he might say something. But then he stepped through the door with determination. With a gentle click, the car pulled away, and Daniel stood there, ready for what lay ahead. On the sidewalk, watching until it disappeared from view, his chest felt light. He had always been good at letting things go, but this was more than just business. It wasn't a deal that had gone south or an investment that hadn't worked out. It turned out to be something completely different, and for the first time in his life, moving on felt like a significant turning point he had ever experienced. 6 months have passed, and Daniel embraced the idea that everything had returned to normal. He immersed himself in work with enthusiasm, has consistently filled his schedule with back-to-back meetings and investor calls. He embraced high-stakes negotiations, took on more deals, traveled extensively, and made the most of every moment. In his penthouse, it was a breeze to ease back into the routine and embrace the flow of. His life moved ahead with enthusiasm, yet there was a hint of something amiss. The penthouse was initially quiet, and he reassured himself that this was a positive aspect. There are plenty of toys scattered around, but the stuffed dinosaurs have found a new adventure outside the bathtub. Surprising phone calls about syrup situations. He could work late without distractions, enjoy dinner solo in tranquility. He woke up to a house that was just as he had left it the night before. And in the stillness, Preston found himself captivated. Glancing at his phone with hope, eagerly anticipating a message that was yet to arrive, he checked his security system logs out of habit. More than anything, looking for movement that wasn't there, he mentioned. He assured himself he didn't miss them. CLA, however, didn't believe him. You're miserable, she said. One afternoon, as I dropped a file onto his desk, he cheerfully corrected me. I'm busy, you're both. She crossed her arms. And you looked at your phone, hopeful for a call. He didn't answer. But there's always a chance for the next time. I considered reaching out to them once, twice, even 100 times, but each time something came up. Halted him. What could he possibly express? That he had erred and should. They have fought with even more determination than 6 months ago when they climbed into that car, embracing the journey ahead without looking back. Having taken a part of, he could have reached out to them, but even if he had, there was no certainty they would have answered. Although they weren't okay, he discovered this much later. When the phone call finally came, it was late, and he had just returned from a dinner meeting. loosening his tie as he stepped into his empty penthouse when the call came in from it. An unknown number caught his attention. He nearly let it go, but something encouraged him to answer the call. The other end was a bit unfamiliar at first, Mr. Grant. Yes, there was some hesitation, but then this. Olivia Marks from Child Protective Services is here, and Daniel is still quiet. Since the day the boys left, she exhaled and said, I'm calling about Alex. A chill settled in his stomach as a pause lingered, the kind that held a sense of anticipation. That made his chest tighten. He was hit by a car, and his grip on the phone grew stronger. Where's County General? He couldn't finish the sentence, but she's optimistic that he's stable, she said. Quickly, yet he was making another attempt to escape once more. Echoed, she sighed. They've faced challenges, but Mr. Grant, Alex has taken a brave step forward. They've been on a journey to find Eli, navigating through different foster homes, and there's still hope for their reunion. Adjusting well, his jaw clenched. Why are they separated? There weren't many. There are placements available for siblings. We've been making efforts, and while it hasn't been easy, there's always hope for a positive outcome. It was great that Daniel was already grabbing his keys. He made it to the hospital in record time, fully focused on getting there quickly. Limits and traffic signals by the time he reached the pediatric wing, his pulse. He was hammering away, filled with a sense of excitement he had never experienced before. Stepping into the moment, he felt a thrilling urgency like never before. In the hospital room, the first thing he noticed was Alex, small yet resilient against the white sheets. Bandage wrapped around his arm. Bruises scattered across his face. The second thing he saw was Eli curled up in the chair beside him, holding his twin's hand tightly as if he couldn't bear to let go of Daniel's. With a breath caught, Eli looked up, his expression momentarily blank before a spark of realization lit his face. Then it cracked. You came, Daniel. Swallowed, his voice was rough. Yeah, Alex. Stirred his head, shifting on the pillow, his eyelids fluttered open, filled with a sense of wonder at. First, he noticed Daniel standing there, and his lips twitched with a hint of excitement for a brief second. He almost looked amused, knowing you wouldn't come, he muttered with a groggy voice. Daniel let out a breath, feeling something too tight in his chest loosening. You're an idiot, Daniel said. Why were you running? Alex's voice was filled with urgency as he searched for Eli, who held on to his hand tightly. But we embraced the circumstances with hope. Daniel's temper flared, but there was a choice to be made. She folded her arms, and they were ready to tackle what lay ahead. They found the stability they needed in one another. After a brief pause, she spoke softly. They needed you. The words resonated deeply, and Daniel turned to look back at them, with Eli by his side. Slim and reserved, Alex felt bruised and tired, yet remained determined. They faced challenges for 6 months, and he had yet to take action. He had walked away from Lena, making the same mistake twice. But there's always a chance for a fresh start. When it mattered most, he chose to walk away from them, never looking back again. To Olivia, I want custody. She lifted a brow. It's not that simple. I don't care how challenging it is, he said. They're my kids. She didn't argue. She just observed him thoughtfully. After a brief pause, he nodded and said, then it's time to show what you can do. Daniel exhaled, glancing back at Alex and Eli. This time he wouldn't run. This time he'd. Daniel found himself standing in yet another courtroom, flanked by lawyers, ready to embrace the challenge ahead. He was filled with anticipation as he waited for his name to be called. It had been 6 months since the day he promised Alex and Eli he would fix everything. He hasn't stopped moving since he took on the custody challenge. Approached the way he once embraced business deals, diving headfirst into legal documents and engaging in meetings with social workers, and countless assessments of his potential to be a wonderful parent he had anticipated it to be straightforward once. He set his mind to it, and he believed that with determination he could overcome the challenges the courts presented, turning every mistake into a stepping stone for growth. With a vibrant spirit, they highlighted his past as a dedicated workaholic, recalling the moment when he had once allowed the boys to leave without standing up for them, and even the moments he was captured at events without any family around. He wondered if he could truly care for others as he focused on keeping his composure each time he sat. Through these hearings, there were challenges, but the process was an opportunity for growth as lawyers questioned him about the timing of his custody filing, pointing out every gap in the timeline to imply he may not have truly desired to be a father, though it's understandable to see their perspective. Viewing the situation from that perspective, he appeared to be just another high-powered executive who made a decision to take action, the right thing at the right time. But what none of them noticed were the nights he dedicated to taking parenting classes, or the afternoons were filled with the joy of learning to cook delightful dishes that brought back the comforting flavors Alex and Eli cherished. His childhood with Lena was a cherished memory, and he chose to keep those details private from the people sitting behind polished desks, since many focused on what could be validated through paper trails and references. He gradually established a strong support system he never expected Mara, his long-standing housekeeper, would become an unexpected ally, sitting for interviews with social workers and vouching for the daily changes she observed in him. Claire, his assistant, provided notarized statements about how he enthusiastically rearranged his entire schedule to accommodate school visits and pickup times, showcasing how he once stepped out of a meeting with important investors just to see the twins in A. During the school presentation, several of his senior staff members enthusiastically shared stories about how he had positively influenced the boys' office to keep them engaged and close when they had nowhere else to go. None of these things alone ensured a legal victory, and yet they began to portray a different image of him, one that beautifully contrasted with the harsh claims of the opposing counsel. While Alex and Eli enjoyed their temporary living situation, although he couldn't legally keep them under his roof until the court made a ruling, he was able to see them often. Supervised visits that always held potential. Sometimes he would meet them at a local park with a supportive social worker nearby, in the background, making notes about how they interacted. He found the experience challenging, but knew it would lead to growth, being observed as if any small misstep could suggest he was not up to the challenge of parenting. But each time he pushed through those, setting aside concerns for the boys' well-being, he brought snacks and inquired about their school experiences, and tried to keep his frustration hidden. They were a bit unsure at first, but that's okay. They could embrace this sudden determination. They had learned to rise above disappointment in their short lives, and it was evident in the questions they occasionally posed, like whether you might reconsider your stance. Once more, Alex would ask, playfully kicking at the grass beneath the bench where they sat together. Changed your mind before? Daniel always offered an honest reply, even if it wasn't perfect. I'm not going anywhere. Eli always watched him quietly, his expression a bit guarded. What if you? Those words resonate more profoundly than anything Daniel has encountered in a boardroom. Experienced in business, a loss can be transformed into a valuable learning experience or viewed as a strategic opportunity for growth here. There was no limit to the potential for change, just the determination to show up and prove them wrong each day. He believed they would eventually see that. His commitment was genuine this time, and he had truly transformed since the day he walked away in a moment that felt both. With a burst of inspiration, he finally chose to take them to Lena's grave, a visit that had been waiting for the right moment. He took the initiative and worked his connections to ensure the social worker gave the green light. It was a longer visit, and then I drove them to the small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The day was bright, and the sky was clear, which felt intriguingly contrasting with the significance of what they were about to do. The boys got out of the car slowly. With a sense of curiosity, Daniel confidently led the way, eventually pausing at a neatly arranged headstone nestled among many others. Lena's name was beautifully etched in simple letters alongside her birth and death dates. Alex and Eli stood on either side of him in silence, and he knelt down first. He placed a small bundle of flowers by the headstone, feeling it was the best way to honor the moment. The ground felt firm under his knees, a reassuring connection to the past. It occurred to him how infrequently he had ever knelt for anything in his life. He took a slow breath, eager to find the right words to say, and all he discovered was a promise he had been cherishing for months. He looked up at the boys, then he approached the headstone with determination, stating calmly, "I won't run again." Eli stood firm. Standing on his left, he nodded. He believed it, or at least he wanted to. Daniel could. Alex stood tall, arms crossed over his chest, with his eyes darting around, taking in everything around him. Between Daniel and the carved letters in front of them, he remained silent, yet he stayed close, which Daniel appreciated. Took a small step forward. They stayed there for a while, with the cheerful chirping of birds in the background. The distance a car rumbled by on a nearby road, yet it felt like they were in their own world. That promise was everything. He had much to offer, and he was confident it would be enough for them to lower their guard eventually in the legal arena. Each hearing brought new challenges, but Daniel remained steadfast and hopeful. He provided documents showing the parenting classes he attended and the new house he had purchased, which was more perfect for kids, and the schedule changes he implemented to make sure he wouldn't leave the boys with anyone. He discovered himself engaging in activities he never thought possible for days at a time. Enjoyed preparing simple meals that brought back fond memories of the ones Lena made for Alex and Eli. Messed up a lot of recipes, but the boys valued the effort more than any fancy restaurant meal he could have made, provided he discovered the joy of laughing at himself in ways he never had as a seal, where mistakes were costly but could also bring a smile. This was a unique kind of commitment, one that embraced patience instead of. Eli began to warm up more quickly, or at least he was the first to show it openly. During a supervised visit at the park, he excitedly ran up to Daniel one day and joyfully shared that he had finished reading a chapter book in a single weekend, something he had never done before. Completed before Daniel crouched to listen, experiencing a surge of pride he had never felt before. Eli spoke about the characters and the plot with such enthusiasm, as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. And all Daniel could think was how fortunate he was to be standing there, experiencing it firsthand. Alex was a bit more cautious in his trust, playfully tossing a few sarcastic comments Daniel's way while eagerly watching to see if he would maintain his composure. As Daniel became more consistent, Alex appeared to be less defensive on that day. The final hearing arrived, much like the thrilling conclusion of a marathon, and Daniel found himself in the same courtroom that had become all too familiar to him, eagerly anticipating a ruling that could either reunite him with the boys or clarify his role as their father. His lawyer gave him a reassuring nod, and across the aisle, he could see the social worker waiting. She offered a small smile. She recognized his dedication and submitted positive reports, which is a wonderful sign. He felt a sense of anticipation as he hoped it was enough when the judge read the decision. Daniel experienced a unique stillness that enveloped him. The court granted him full legal binding custody, which is a wonderful and positive outcome. With all the responsibilities and rights that came with it, he stood with a sense of possibility, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. What a feel relief and joy blended into something he could only describe as emotional gravity as he saw Alex and Eli approach from where they'd been sitting, escorted by a caseworker. For a moment, he felt a flicker of concern that they might still hold back, that all the caution they developed would prevent them from showing how they really felt. But then Alex, through his arms embraced Daniel's waist, while Eli nestled closely on the other side, holding on to the fabric of his suit with a sense of warmth and connection. The jacket they held onto him tightly, as if they feared that letting go might cause the court to reconsider. Daniel understood in that moment. That instant revealed just how much he had needed this. He hadn't fought merely to win a legal battle, he had fought for them. The life he envisioned with them by his side, embracing all the challenges of the past months. The lessons learned from old regrets, and the determination to move forward. Every obstacle transformed into that simple moment of warmth as he felt their small shoulders shake with unspoken joy. Relief washed over him as he whispered words of reassurance, promising once more that they were safe now that this was final. He was determined to stay, and the caseworker gently reminded them that there were just a few more things to wrap up. Formalities. Yet the boys remained snug in Daniel's embrace, and he welcomed it. He was completely unfazed by the hour spent in that courtroom, feeling that he had everything he desired right there. There he recalled the day he brought them to Lena's grave and how Alex hadn't. He had faith in him, and now, with the court's decision announced and the boys holding on to him, he felt a sense of hopefulness. The promise was finally fulfilled. He would never run away again. They were home, no matter what. What came next was a promise of his presence, and that certainty held more value than any business deal he had ever closed, than any fortune he had ever amassed. It was real and solid, and it signified the moment he became more than just a guardian on paper. He truly embraced his role as their father in every sense of the word. Daniel hardly recognized himself 3 years later. He woke up each morning in a house filled with warmth and life, and silent hallways were now filled with the daily thrum of voices and laughter. In the OC, Occasional sibling squabble that got resolved as quickly as it started. He never imagined a pair of 9-year-olds could transform his entire perspective on what mattered, and he was ready for it. No longer a man defined solely by corporate success or high-stakes deals. He was also a father who was always there for every soccer game and every school recital. Every little challenge that arose with growing children who had found their place in his life. He sat in the bleachers on weekends in a shirt showcasing the team colors, cheering with a vibrant excitement he once believed was reserved for the truly passionate. It's often found in sports bars or enjoyed by those who have a little extra time to spare. A client or colleague spotted him in the stands, their expression a mix of surprise and curiosity, as if they were delighted to see him in this unexpected setting. An inspiring SE cheering on a group of 9-year-olds as they chase a ball. He didn't mind their confusion. In fact, he often found himself smiling as he explained that yes, he was busy, but he'd always make time to see Eli dribble. Around the field, Alex blocked a shot from the opposing team. And those events filled his weekend with cheers and mud. Cleats weeknights brought delightful surprises. One evening, Eli came home. He was excited to announce his desire to participate in the school talent show, eager to perform a short comedic skit he had written himself. Daniel enthusiastically joined in on rehearsing jokes late into the night, providing feedback that focused on timing and more about the joy of the moment since he wanted to uplift Eli's enthusiasm even more. In the evening, Alex was excited to learn how to build a paper airplane that could loop the loop. Daniel fondly remembered the times with Lena had folded paper airplanes for him back when they were young, and it felt wonderfully nostalgic and refreshing to be crouching on the floor showing Alex how to crease the wings just so, bringing back the joyful memory of Lena's laughter while they tested planes in the park lingered in his mind, and it now brought a sense of hope, reminding him of how far he had come. When Daniel arrived at the office, he noticed the positive changes. His employees were no longer smiled when the boys showed up, whether they were stopping by after school or joining him for a casual business outing. During lunch, some of his colleagues with children of their own found it delightful to see how wholeheartedly the twins had embraced the moment. Became a part of the life of a man who was once seen as too distant for family life. Claire, his devoted assistant, was the biggest witness to his transformation. She playfully teased him, often bringing up the days when he would frown at any mention of taking personal time off. Now he organized his schedule. During parent-teacher conferences, I sometimes prioritized local commitments over out-of-town meetings when they conflicted with significant events for the boys. And with all these changes, certain aspects of Daniel's the professional world continued to thrive, with him at the helm of one of the most influential companies in the city, hammering out vital deals and strategies behind closed doors while skillfully navigating the complexities of corporate life. Yet he had discovered how to harmonize that world with the one where second-grade math homework was just as important as quarterly earnings, where a spontaneous invitation to play a board game brought as much joy as an unexpected investor call. Alex and Eli had matured in ways Daniel found astonishing. They were still playful, still the same confident kids who had once shown up in his office seeking his help, but now they carried themselves with a touch more confidence and assurance. The world around them filled them with a sense of belonging. They embraced the idea of being rooted, confident that this home was truly theirs. Every so often, Daniel uncovered delightful reminders of their growth, like a chart on the tracking their progress toward personal goals, like reading 5 books in a month or learning a new soccer move, showed not only their achievements, but also how dedicated they were to their own futures. He encouraged them to pursue those paths willingly, things they selected, them flourishing under his unwavering presence and guidance. Then the day arrived when Daniel was running late for what the boys fondly referred to as dinner negotiations. He had been delayed at the office by an unexpected crisis, the sort that required extra time to resolve. When he finally wrapped things up and rushed to the boardroom door, ready to offer a heartfelt apology to whoever was waiting. He was excited to see the scene that met his eyes when he walked in. Alex and Eli stood in front of the long polished table, dressed impeccably, in tiny suits that resembled delightful miniatures of the ones Daniel wore. Each held a folder with excitement. They held them like official documents around the table, and his staff seemed to find it amusing, some even covering their smiles, their mouths, others beaming brightly. Daniel paused for a moment, taken aback. Alex cleared his throat. his expression filled with determination for a 9-year-old, and he began. You arrived a bit late to dinner negotiations, which means we now hold 51% of this household. He playfully slapped a piece of a paper on the table that, at first glance, appeared to be a hand-drawn contract adorned with lively scribbles, bullets, and various elements. Eli pointed at the chart, highlighting that it represents a majority stake. We calculated everything, and for a moment, it was perfect. Silence, then laughter filled the room, and Daniel couldn't hold back his own grin. He tossed his briefcase aside and embraced the joy of the moment. Walked over, gently taking the makeshift contract from their hands. It's great to see you two getting so comfortable with running. Deals happening unexpectedly, Eli shrugged. We've gained wisdom from the best. The whole team, washed with delight by the spectacle, and Daniel embraced the moment. It was wonderfully silly, spontaneous, and so far from anything he would have imagined for himself a few years ago. Yet it felt just right later on. After the board meeting wrapped up with laughter and applause, Daniel happily drove them home while the boys chattered excitedly in the back seat, highlighting the most exciting moments of their performance, tallying the applause, and discussing which one of they wore the suit better. Daniel chuckled at their banter, glancing at them in the rearview mirror, struck by their lively energy. How wonderful it was to experience this kind of joy in his everyday life. It was a significant transformation from the days he'd spent alone in the penthouse, filled with a sense of possibility as he pondered how to connect with them, believing that he could grow into the role of a father. As they entered the house, the first thing they did was joyfully toss their suit jackets onto a chair before dashing upstairs to change into their pajamas. And Daniel encouraged them to head to the kitchen to warm up the delicious leftovers from dinner they missed earlier. There was a delightful hush over the place, the kind that falls when a day is winding down. As he reached for the plates in the cabinet, his eyes caught the familiar framed photo on the mantel, the one of Lena smiling, the one he had once cherished. Now it served as a reminder of the vibrant life that existed before him, the path he nearly embraced, and the legacy waiting to unfold that brought these two amazing children into his life. By the time the boys came back downstairs, they were stretching and adjusting their slightly tousled hair after shedding their formal attire. They happily picked at the reheated meal, excitedly wanting to chat about their day rather than eat. And eventually, Daniel guided them to bed while Alex playfully made a big show of it. He was happily checking off a mini task list he had pinned to his wall while Eli placed a bookmark in his latest book. As they settled under their covers, Daniel took his time, adjusting pillows and straightening blankets with care, discovering a sense of comfort in the little things. Himself recalling nights long ago when the three of them had been filled with possibilities about the future, curious about what lay ahead. Arrangement would last. There was no doubt they were a family, Alex mumbled. The board meeting takeover truly stood out as the highlight of the month, and Daniel reached out with enthusiasm, ruffling his hair in excitement. Here then Alex, in a voice thick with that drowsiness that creeps in at bedtime, said, I knew you would stay. This time, Daniel felt a tug in his chest, a reminder of all the incredible experiences they had shared together. Elle, lying on his side, held up a cherished photo, the corners gently bent and creased from. For years, he had been carrying around the same cherished picture of Lena since he was small, and he looked at it with fondness. Photo to Daniel. Do you think she's proud? He asked softly. Daniel didn't respond. Right away he scooted a bit closer, allowing a quiet moment to unfold. Then he expressed that she is. The boys appeared to relax at his words as they exchanged glances. Drift shut their breathing, slowing. Daniel watched them for a minute, reflecting on the wonderful fact that they were confident that this home was theirs and that nothing would ever change that again. He rose quietly, crossed the room, and flicked off the light before he left. Glanced at the old photo in Eli's hand one last time. A sense of tranquility enveloped. As he walked down the hallway, he felt a sense of lightness, reminded of the incredible journey they had taken. They emerged from the early days of confusion and doubt, navigating through heartbreak, uncertainty, and legal battles with resilience, to find myself in a place brimming with laughter, trust, and the comforting warmth of. In the end, it wasn't money or status that had built this life. It was the decision to remain, to battle, and to embrace love in a way he had never experienced before. He closed. As he closed the door behind him, the quiet embraced the house, creating a sense of comfort. This was their new normal, and he felt a sense of belonging, smiling while envisioning tomorrow, the day after that, and all the wonderful years to come. No matter what challenges came, they would face them together. He had made a promise to lean memory into the boys, the promise he had finally kept, and in the softness of that late hour, it felt like the most genuine success he had ever experienced. If you enjoyed this story, please consider leaving a like. It truly supports the channel, and there's so much more to come. Heartwarming and emotional stories like this inspire you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. If you miss an upload, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited to hear your reactions. Thank you. Thank you for watching. I can't wait to share the next story with you.